Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. A real pleasure of mine tonight to introduce you to a fascinating young lady. Her name is Lesley Strong. She's a best-selling author of something called The You Factor, 10 Tools for Reclaiming Your Personal Power. 10 tools for reclaiming your personal power. I think I need some of that. She's a speaker, an executive coach, and the founder of the Sandbox, a technology that enables an organization to utilize their leadership capital to sponsor the development, advancement of women, underrepresented groups, and the WFH workforce. What's the WHF workforce?
Work from home. It's our new acronym from COVID.
Lesley's superpower is understanding the human psyche to help organizations uncover what sabotages people so they can in turn unleash their authentic genius. Lesley puts the human in human resources. Lesley Strong, how are you? Welcome to our show.
I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Brian.
Thank you so much. So this is fascinating. You've got a superpower.
Don't we all? I think we all have a superpower. It's just a matter of figuring out what it is.
And how did you figure out what your superpower is?
It took a lot of work. It took a lot of diving into myself and realizing, what I love to do and what I do best. And it always came back to learning about what makes people tick, what motivates them, what gets in their way. And I've been doing that for 30 years now. So I realized that's pretty much my superpower.
Excellent. Congratulations for finding your superpower. So tell me about this book, The You Factor. 10 tools for reclaiming your personal power.
Yes. So the You Factor, it was published in 2014, and it was written mainly for women, and it's really about how we lose our power, how we give it away to other people, and how to really get it back. And so how to reclaim it. And so there's 10 tools in there for looking at why did you give it away? What are your circumstances and how to go get it back.
And when did you write it?
Well, it took me 3 years, but it got published in 2014. So it took a while.
And this must have been a big achievement for you.
It was a big achievement. It was also, I was working. I had 2 little girls at the time who aren't so little anymore. And so trying to put it all in there together and, being married and all the other things that life has can get in the way. It takes a long time to write a book.
And so what'd you do? Write it every morning or something?
I lived my book, and that's how it got written is I grew, just the way I grew up in a very patriarchal home, and women in my home didn't have power. We had no say. We weren't supposed to have too many opinions. We were supposed to cook and clean and serve the men. And it was a man who was going to make me happy for the rest of my life. And that just didn't happen. So I had to learn how to, what was going on the inside of my body saying, are you kidding? This isn't fair. I want a voice. I want to speak. I want to say something. And that's not how I was brought up. And so I had to really work at it for many, many years to say, what is it that gets in the way, and why don't we have power, and what takes our power, and how do we get it back? And so it was a lifelong journey.
Absolutely fascinating. Sounds fun. We're going to take a break and come back more with Lesley Strong in just a minute. Stay with us. Well, welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with Lesley Strong. She's the best-selling author of The You Factor, 10 Tools for Reclaiming Your Personal Power. She's a speaker, an executive coach, and the founder of the Sandbox. Lesley, what's the Sandbox?
The Sandbox is it's a technology, it's an app, and it is used in organizations for sponsorship relationships. So it's when a senior leader wants to advance and develop a high potential or someone underneath them in order to get them to the next level. And the reason sponsorship is such an amazing tool for organizations, especially when it comes to women, underrepresented groups, and the work from home phenomenon that we have on right now, is that it allows people who wouldn't normally be seen and heard and for those advancement opportunities or for development opportunities. It allows them to be seen and heard, and allows them to come into the organization in order to advance.
Organizations typically, shy away from the emotional, the psyche side, the psychological side of issues in people. Why is this, do you think?
Well, if we go back to the 70s, when Milton Friedman just basically said that the profit is the business's only purpose. And so we've been working that way ever since. And, organizations are made up of individuals, and the individual's only purpose is not profit. We may work for money, but there's so much more, which is internal, about purpose and who we are. And we want to be seen, we want to be heard, we want to feel value, we want to be valuable. And so organizations have just built themselves to say, basically, when you walk in the door, your emotions stay out, your family stays out, everything else stays out. You come to work, you do your job, and we are on the path of just making some money. And that is just not how, human beings are holistic. And it's much easier not to dive into our human psyche and what makes us tick, unless it's really good. They want to know what motivates you. But, they never talk about who are you as a person and how to develop the parts of us that can get motivated, or the parts that actually sabotage us, because it's messy. It takes a lot of work, and it gets in the way.
It does. It takes a lot of work, a lot of time. Why should companies bother? What's the benefit? Why not we just, hire good people, and if they don't work out, get rid of them?
Well, because
I'm being a little bit provocative with that.
No, I know. And you know what? But that is exactly the way they think. So it's perfect. When we know who we are and we do the work and we figure out, what's running us and what's getting in our way, we actually can then tap into, as I call it, our authentic genius. And that is really where creativity is, the foundation of creativity, the foundation of collaboration, the foundation of connection, loyalty. And when we are feeling really good about ourselves, and we are in a job where we feel purposeful and we feel valued and we feel like we have a voice, people move mountains. And if you just feel like you're a cog in a machine, you're like, you just kind of you phone it in. You go, I'm just going to make my $30 an hour or my $50,000 a year. I don't really care. I'm going to go and call in some sick days. You just don't put in the same effort. You don't have the same productivity. And then you don't have the loyalty. And those costs on a company alone of retention, and people leaving, people sick days, now mental health. I mean, it's billions and billions of dollars.
What is authenticity?
Authenticity, funny enough, there's authenticity, basically most people think is just being yourself, except that there's lots of parts of us that we really don't want to be more of, the not so great parts. And so, authenticity is really about being able to stand in who you really would like to be, your higher self, let's call it, but really knowing all the parts of you, so that when some parts show up that you don't like let's call it your victim, someone gets a promotion and you're like, well, what did they get a promotion for? That's not fair, right? That might be authentic, but is it really the authentic side you want to show people? So knowing our entire self really allows us to be authentic, because then we can choose who we want to show up in the places that we need it to show up. And then we stop shaming ourselves for that part of us that showed up that we wish we hadn't showed up, like the whiner, the pleaser, the victim. When they show up, we end up shaming ourselves, going, oh, I wish I hadn't said that. Oh, I wish I hadn't done that. Or have you ever been in a conversation, Brian, where you're like, oh my God, 10 minutes after you're done, you think, I wish I had have said that instead of, or why didn't I think of this thing when I was talking to them? We kind of go back. And so authenticity is really being able to understand yourself well enough to be able to say what you need to say in a way that's compassionate, empathetic, and for the better of not only yourself, but all of humanity. And not just saying what you feel like saying because it's judgmental and opinionated. And you're like, well, that's authentic. I don't care what you think. I don't care how you feel. I don't think that's what authenticity is.
So how do you figure out who you are authentically, who your the authentic self is? What's the process?
Well, there's a lot of work which I come from, which is the Carl Jung psychology, which is learning learning about your shadow side. So Carl Jung stated that we all have a shadow, which is the parts of us that we actually deny and repress and put away. That the parts that we don't want anyone to see, because they're the parts when we were little that made us unlovable. Like our parents said, if you do this, people won't like you, right? My father used to tell me, nobody's going to love you with all those opinions. And so I was
Oh my God, seriously?
well, because I grew up in a very patriarchal home, very 50s, my parents were very 50s styled parents. And so, what goes into the shadow is that opinionated person, and what comes out in order to not be that opinionated person is a pleaser, is somebody who doesn't have opinions and says, oh, well, if you believe it, that must be true. And so it doesn't allow me to stand in my own self. And so learning that about myself has allowed me to say, oh, okay, let me go back to that opinionated little girl, but in a way that's smart and researched, and it comes out and it's authentic, because then I'm like, it's okay, I'm allowed to have a point of view. I'm okay with that.
Okay, this is interesting. So do you think that you were opinionated because of genetics or because of socialization or what? And then it sounds like the opinionated part of you was stamped down for 10, 20 years. And then it came back.
So it was stomped down for about 45 or 50. It was like ever since I was very little. So I think it's more of a wiring. It's, it's these things that happen to us when we're like 4, 5, 6 years old. We're really little. And we learn what gets us love and what doesn't get us love. And so we learn how to manipulate those things. So we got to go, I don't want that personality trait. Like for boys, when boys are sensitive, it's like, don't be sensitive, suck it up. There's no crying. Boys don't get to cry. No crying in baseball, no crying in hockey. Be tough, be a man. And girls are like, don't be angry, don't be forceful. Girls are meant to be softer and sweeter, right? Like these are the collective types of shadow that go on. And so then you cover that up. And then so after you cover it up, it's kind of going back to reclaim it and saying, as a boy, you might say, it's okay to be sensitive. I'm a sensitive guy.
So you went through this 40 plus years of not being opinionated, or at least having your opinions being squelched. What brought you out of it?
Many things, a number of bad relationships, a divorce, and always feeling not authentic. And that was the piece. So it's kind of, when you have, and I would not say what I wanted to say, I would feel like I was abandoning myself. I would feel like I was not being true to myself, because I'd have something to say, but I was so afraid that.
So this is interesting. It sounds like your father was patriarchal and a misogynist, and you picked a husband that was as well.
Well, that is how psychology works. Isn't that the funny thing? My husband wasn't that bad, but as far as my father, but that is the patterning, right? We recreate these patterns. It's a crazy thing. It's not the greatest thing, but it's to teach us these lessons. That's what I believe. So we can so we can become authentic and figure out who we are.
But it took you a long time. What would your ex-husband say? Would he say that you were always opinionated, or that he squelched your opinions, or what do you think?
He would never say he squelched my opinions. Of course not. We would have maybe different opinions about that, but he would say that I would have opinions, but typically when my opinions would come out, because I wasn't comfortable with them and I wasn't authentic about them, they would sometimes come out in the wrong way, or too strong or too forceful. But he would never. That it's the interesting thing. It's even if you look at sort of like Black Lives Matter or the Me Too movement, many people don't understand where the microaggressions are when they are talking to someone, that they are being biased or that they are committing a microaggression. We don't know it in ourselves because it's just who we are. And that's part of having to look at ourselves to say, what's the part of me that does this that I can't even see it? It's so unconscious, but I'm offending people, but I'm saying things that don't work. I'm causing problems in my relationships at work or at home. These are the things, these are the really important questions to start asking ourselves is, where is that wiring coming from? And how do I get to it? And how do I bring light to it so that I know what to do with it?
We're having a fascinating conversation with Lesley Strong, author of a book about personal power. What's it called? What's the book called?
The You Factor.
And how does one buy it?
On Amazon.
Awesome. Yep. We're going to take a break and come back more with Lesley Strong in just a minute. I'm going to ask her about what some of these 10 powers are and a little bit more about her superpower. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, Second 960. We're chatting tonight with Lesley Strong. She's a best-selling author of The You Factor, 10 Tools for Reclaiming Your Personal Power. Lesley, interesting conversation about authenticity and personal power. Tell me, what is personal power and why is it so important to figure it out and unleash it?
So personal power is really when it's a feeling. It's a very hard thing to describe, but it's really when we are standing in our own truth, what we know to be true, whether it is agreed upon in society or by our tribe, by our friends, by our family, and to be able to stand in that with confidence and with our self-esteem, and know that is who we are, and that is what we believe, and that it's okay to stand in there, and that no matter who believes us or doesn't or agrees with us, we are still enough and we're still valuable as human beings. That's what personal power is.
You talk about 10 tools for reclaiming your personal power. Can you tell us about some of those tools?
Sure. So, one of the tools, one of my favorite tools is to see it from another perspective. So often we get very narrow-minded when we have a situation, and we can only see it from our perspective. And so it looks like somebody's doing something to us, like in a relationship, someone might be, as we talked about before, not allowing someone to have a voice, but it might be not something that big. And then it looks like something's happening to you. And if you look at it from another perspective to say, well, I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know who are they and where are they coming from? And if I were to walk a mile in their shoes, would they see it different than me? And what's another perspective? How else can I look at this situation? It's not unlike the glass half empty, glass half full, right? It's like, what's the perspective we're looking from? So that really allows us to kind of to reclaim our power in the way of being able to see the world in very different ways.
Okay,
and
so how do you see yourself through other people's eyes? Do you go ask them?
You can, sure. You definitely can. You could, if somebody said to you, if someone said to you at work, you're not doing a great job, and I need you to redo this pitch, and it's a terrible pitch, and I need you to redo it. And you could be very offended, or you could kind of look at, and think, oh, they're a jerk, and you could feel shameful, or you can also look from their perspective and say, okay, so well, what does my pitch have to do with them, and how do they, where's their reputation? And you want to look at that, and you want to look at the company and the boss. And then you may just go to them and say, well, what is it that's wrong with it? What's wrong? What do you need? You need the feedback. What happens is many of us don't ask for feedback because we're ashamed of our behavior. We're ashamed of something. And so we shirk it and we go, oh my God, I don't want to know more about it because that makes me feel bad. It makes me feel awful about myself. And then you feel powerless. When you don't feel good about yourself and you're sitting in shame, you feel powerless. And so being able to, as I said, look at different perspectives, but also talk about it and bring it out, you can get rid of that place of feeling powerless.
Okay, sounds good. Give me another one. Can you give me another one?
You always have a choice. So in every situation, a lot of the times we think, I have to do that. I don't have a choice. I can't quit my job because I need to make money. I don't have a choice. I can't leave a spouse because we have children. I don't have a choice. And the power comes, and that's a place of feeling really powerless. is thinking you don't have a choice. So the power comes from realizing you do have a choice. You have many choices. So you can quit your job. Yes, you may not have money, but you can quit your job. There's nothing holding you back. You're not chained to your desk. Literally, you're not locked in your office, literally. You can quit. And to know that you absolutely can quit, it becomes a choice to say, but I'm choosing not to quit, not right now. And so what that does is it actually gives you the power to be the narrator of your own destiny, to say, okay, well, I clearly don't like my job, but I can quit, but I'm not going to. But what I'm going to do is for the next year, I'm going to set myself up so that I can quit in a year. Right. So it has you actually look at things very differently, but it puts you in the power seat. It has you actually not feel powerless, but feel empowered to do something about it.
Okay, so you had a father that was paternalistic. You married someone that you say wasn't as bad, but was similar. You were obviously
not mean to bring him into this.
you were together for a while, and now you say that you divorced. How did you find the power to go through that? And you had this opinionated nature that was to a certain extent not finding its authentic fulfillment. How did you find the power in that? How did you find the choice?
So, well, as I said, it wasn't easy, but what happens when we put things in the shadow is we sort of adapt a different behavior in order so that people will never know what's in our shadow. So when I was opinionated, what I did was I adapted the behavior of being a real pleaser. And so I just was always doing what other people wanted me to do, what I thought they wanted me to do, because that's where I got my value, is from other people. And so when I realized that setup, that pattern was really bankrupt, because I was giving everything and then I thought I should be getting certain things back and I wasn't, left me really powerless. And it just over time, because my body was just reacting to it and unhappy and angry and resentful. And I said, I don't want to live like this anymore. So what's really going on here? And, it's funny when you say about my ex-husband, because actually, if I look at him, he's actually a great guy. It's really how I interpreted it. It was my perspective on what things were, on how things were, because of how I was brought up. And so I got the power by not wanting to feel powerless anymore. I just didn't like it. I wanted to be in charge of my own self.
And was it that choice that was the catalyst to thinking about all this authenticity and power and superpowers and writing the book?
Yeah. It was really realizing that I just had a lot of patterns that weren't working for me, and I didn't want to be powerless anymore. Yeah.
And that was you studied psychology and different psychologists and different thoughts of psyche and stuff like that beforehand, or was this something you just went through at the time?
Yeah, no, I'd done psychology in university, nothing major, but I went on I get a mystery school tour, I call it. And so went into many, like starting in like 2000, 2010, 2009, started different schools of thought. So everything from spirituality to the human psyche to shadow work. I mean, like all the stuff that everyone else would call woo-woo. I dove into all of that. So
this was your Eat, Love, Pray tour.
It was my Eat, Love, Pray tour. It was my woo-woo tour. Yeah.
And were you, I've got to ask you, I apologize. Were you still married at the time?
I was when I first started.
And as you were going on this woo-woo tour, what did your husband say about it all?
He thought I was crazy. He literally think I was crazy. And he was like, as long as, whatever, as long as it works for me, do what you want. But it stopped working for me. So we had to get divorced. And we're still very good friends today. We amicably split. So really it was a growing apart, because I was growing now in a different way from all my woo-woo tour. And I went and I always said I had to go find my heart and my soul. So
and you found it.
And I found it.
Well, congratulations. That's wonderful. I think a lot of people go through your challenges.
A lot, and a lot of women especially, and I maybe because women talk about it more and men don't, but a lot of people go through these challenges. Yes.
And so how do you other than buying your book, of course, how do you recommend people sort of solve their situations? The key is finding out who their authentic self is. Is that it?
Well, really, you have to start doing some serious internal work and figuring out what are your patterns of behavior. What are the ones that are starting to feel like they don't work? So, I, from my coaching, in my coaching business, I would have women who were, trying to get advancement opportunities in organizations, and they were feeling powerless to move up in the organization. And so it's like, well, why? Is it because of the organization, or what part can you look at, or what do you think's holding you back? And so to look internally, like, what are you doing? What are some of the patterns that you keep seeing in your life again and again and again? Because usually that's a really good indication. Seeing where you get triggered by other people. So, when you fly off the handle and you get really emotional really quickly, that's a really good indication that there's something in you that needs to be looked at. It's a part of you that wants to come forward that's probably you've put away, and it's part of your authentic self that needs to come forward.
Lesley, if people want to check you out, do you have a website that they can go to? Lesley
Strong, strongcoaching.com. And then my book is on Amazon. And then I have the Sandbox, which is my corporate business.
Well, I'm going to take a break for some messages and come back with some concluding comments in just a minute, and maybe hear a little bit about the superpower. Stay with us.
Great.
Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, Saga 960. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation with Lesley Strong tonight. Lesley, in closing, I wonder if you could tell us, why do you recommend this, I think what you called it, shadow work or something like that. And you may want to tell us again what shadow work is, but why you recommend this shadow work to figure out, who you are, who your authentic self is, and why does it help?
Well, shadow work is really the parts of us that we keep hidden from the world, the parts that we're ashamed of. And unless we understand those parts of us, they will interject themselves and sabotage us in the most unlikely of times. And so I say that shadow work is the most effective work that I've ever done, and that can be done just so that we can see all the parts of us. Because when we know all the parts of ourselves, the good, the bad, and the ugly, then there's nothing, in us that's running the show. We can make choices. We can have power over our, instead of reacting, we can respond. And so shadow work really is at the basis of our power and allowing us to really, be that authentic genius and find our superpowers. Because when we aren't aware of our shadow, we get stuck in mediocrity. We get stuck in the status quo.
I don't understand. What is our shadow? Is our shadow our fears or our negative traits, or what is our shadow?
Sometimes there are negative traits. They're not necessarily. Sometimes fear is because of our shadow. Shadow is the part of us that when we were young was shamed, and so we tuck it away. That's what our baggage is, and we always say we have baggage. So our
shadow is our baggage.
It's kind of our baggage. So we stick it in a little suitcase when we're little, and we say, I can't be that person, because if I am, I won't be loved and I might be abandoned. It's actually a survival mechanism.
And so your shadow was that you were criticized, that you were opinionated?
Well, we all have a ton of different shadows, right? There's a lot of them, and they're patterns of behavior. So one of mine was, don't be opinionated. And then what we do is we put that away and we say, I can't be that. And then we become a different person in order to adapt in a way that will get us love and not be abandoned. So really the authentic us is kind of what's in that shadow. Like, so sometimes they're good and sometimes they're bad. Like sometimes it's your brilliance and your what makes you fabulous can be in your shadow, and sometimes it's the stuff that's not great. Like a lot of women put their anger in the shadow. We're not allowed to be angry. We get shamed for being angry. Our value, as an equal human being to everybody else, gets put in the shadow. And so when you have your value as a woman, or you might be, or a person of color, or a person who has a sexual preference, like maybe a gay person or a lesbian, they get put in the shadow because it's unacceptable. And then what happens is you go through life always trying to kind of find your value, find your place, find where you're okay. And it's in that place where we can't be authentic, because we're always trying to make up for, trying to be enough, trying to hide our shame. It's always that hiding game, and how do we not let other people see who we really are? Because if they do, they may not like us, is what we think.
And you also said that you have a superpower in trying to find out organizations' psyches. What do you mean by that? And what is your superpower?
Well, it's the individual psyche, because organizations are made up of individuals. And so if organizations want to be on top, and ahead of the game, and be productive and and profitable, then they need to understand how to work with the people. And so people, as we're seeing now after COVID, people really want authentic leadership, right? People want to be heard and seen and valued. They don't want to be a cog in a machine anymore.
People say that over and over again, and yet, half of the United States voted for Donald Trump, who was the authoritarian leader from the 1950s kind of guy. And so, are you really right? Do we really want authentic leaders, or do we want hard asses?
Well, first of all, we're not the United States, we're Canada. So we like them a little nicer than Donald Trump. But have you met our prime minister? Quite the opposite. I think there's a change in the wind. We've had Black Lives Matter, and if we've had it, we've had it a number of times, but this one seems different. I feel like we're now listening. And I think it's the same, like with narcissism. I think we've had a lot of narcissists in our day, and now people are tired of it. So I think there's a change in the wind. And so I do believe that people people like to be told what to do because sometimes it's easier. But at the end of the day, as a human being, when you're working, you want to feel purposeful. You want to feel like you're making a difference, that you're heard. And I think COVID being at home has pushed people to say, like, this is my life. Like, now it's under a microscope, right? You can't go and have drinks after work and anesthetize yourself and pretend things aren't happening. It's all there in front of you now. And so I think people just are looking at their lives a little different, and wanting something more from it.
If people want to buy your book and check you out, how do they do that?
Amazon. It's on Amazon, The You Factor, with the YOU.
And do you have a website that people can go to check out your coaching or something? Yeah,
my Strong Coaching website is where you can get a hold of me for my coaching services, and then the sandbox.com is for my corporate work with my app.
Lesley Strong, thank you so much for joining us tonight and telling us about how to find out our authentic self, how to find out our 10 powers that help us figuring out our authentic self, and that we all have a shadow, and we got to figure out what that shadow is, and I guess deal with it somehow, and maybe understand that it's part of who our authentic self is. Really appreciate it. It's been a fascinating conversation.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, that's our show for tonight, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I come to you every Monday through Friday at 9:60 on your AM dial, or you can stream me online at saga960am.ca, or all my podcasts and video casts are at briancrombie.com, or they're on YouTube under Brian Crombie, or they're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify under Brian Crombie Radio Hour. Thanks very much for joining us. Good night, everybody. Good night, Lesley.
Good night. Thank you.